I tell a funny story about myself. When I was young, a teenager, I used to love this song by Paul Simon called Mother and Child Reunion. I recommend it, it's a good song. And I used to listen to it a lot on my Walkman. And I came up with this elaborate story in my head of what the song must be about. And that's the way it felt to me. I know what this song's about. This must be right. It's the song says, "I would not give you false hope on this strange and mournful day, but the mother and child reunion is only a motion away." And I thought, I got it in my head that he was talking about a mother and a daughter who had a strained relationship or something, and the daughter died. Or maybe the mother died. I don't remember what I thought then. But somebody died. One of them died. And so, like, maybe it was the daughter died and the mother was coming to the funeral. And so it was ironic because they get a reunion. But, you know, it's not a great reunion. It's an ironic reunion because one of them's dead. And I had this in my head that this is what this song is about. I had this whole scenario worked up. Now, this is pre-internet. So I couldn't just go look it up. But sometime along the way, reading in a magazine or something, I came across an interview with Paul Simon where he addresses this song, and I was so excited. And he said that one day he was having chicken and eggs to eat. And that's how he came up with the song. The chicken, the eggs, mother and child, reunion in his stomach. It was a big joke to him. That's what he wrote the song based on eating chicken and eggs. It had nothing to do with this heartbreaking, this like movie type story I had come up with about this mother and her daughter and all this stuff. I had filled in all those blanks and I went around depressed for a while. You know what my thought was? I got it wrong. So all that stuff I had thought of, I mean, I had, I was a teenager, so my relationship with my mother was complicated. And my father was very distant, So I had all this stuff going on in my life. And it made me very emotional to think about, my parents and me and our relationship, and are we close? Are we going to be close? Will it be too late? All these big thoughts. But I thought I had to throw all that out. It was BS because I found out what the song actually means. And so I thought I had to abandon all my ideas and all the feelings and thoughts it brought up in me. Well, I wish I could time travel to go tell that younger self, you don't have to do that at all. Because ultimately it doesn't matter that Paul Simon meant something else. Now, if we were just looking at the intention of the writer, we could say, well, I got it wrong. Put a little X there, right? But remember that that's not the only way to look at a work of art. I derived a lot of meaning from those song lyrics. The fact that they had nothing to do with what the song was, quote, actually about, think of it this way. It doesn't change the fact that my feelings, my thoughts, my ideas, my musings, my strugglings were all very real. So I've started to think of it this way. So that song is what it is. And Paul Simon had an intent when he wrote it. However, as I listened to the song, little bubbles came off of it. Bloop. There's a bubble about my mother, and my relationship with her. It just now exists independently of the song. And bloop, another bubble came off about my relationship with my father. And then bloop, another bubble came off about death, my thoughts about death as a teenager, and the finality of it, and what it would mean for relationships, and that floated off. The reason I'm using the bubble analogy is because that's kind of what's going on, is when I'm interpreting art, I derive all this meaning from it, and now that meaning is sort of separate from the intent of the writer. It's separate from the static, unchanging art that I'm observing, because I am changing constantly. That's what humans are doing. And so I'm a dynamic, system of change. And when I encounter a work of art, that all goes into my interpretation of it. And it creates real feelings, real thoughts, real examination of values. All these things are very real, even though they are not necessarily what Paul Simon, in this case, intended when he wrote the song. Here are some things from the story that are going to make this even more interesting. So, do you remember when Alfie was in the rest area, and it says that he was in there and he heard the voice that was given the weather report on the bathroom speakers in the rest area? It was lonely as a night, and there's this voice reading off the weather. Now think about somebody sitting in a room somewhere reading a weather report. They probably were thinking about their coffee and their shoes not fitting right, or who knows what, how they're going to get home, what's for dinner. They weren't thinking about Alfie. They don't know Alfie. But Alfie hears it, and what does he think? He thinks of corpses, the voice of corpses, like coming through dead vocal cords, he says. And all this feeling of loneliness and kind of darkness, sadness. Now, if you interpreted it just by what the weather reader intended, you'd have to say, well, Alfie was wrong. Put a big X there. Wrong interpretation, Alfie. It's just the weather. But nonetheless, what it revealed was something about how Alfie was feeling, something about himself, where he was in his life. Think about this big scenario Alfie comes up with about the farmhouse and the people in it. This perfect vision, this nice cozy farmhouse with the family doing this and that peaceful thing in the house, just whiling away the evening. The daughter's taking a bath, and the family's downstairs, and they're about to have a nice meal. Maybe one of the meals Alfie is selling. But think about something for a second here. He has no idea what's going on in that house. It could be empty. There could be people in there killing each other. Fighting, you just don't know. You just don't know what's going on in that house. He'll never know what's going on in the house. But what does it tell us when we see his reaction to it and his interpretation and the meaning he gets out of it? Those things are very real to Alfie. He's contrasting that with where he is now. There's one of those ironies. He's in this situation where he's depressed and sad and cold and distant and like rubber thrown on the side of the road. And he's contrasting that with what he assumes is over there. So this reveals that Alfie feels like that other people are happy and he's not. And that there is a sort of happiness out there he could access somehow. But he can't seem to figure out how to do it. He has a family. He clearly cares about them. Doesn't sound like he has any hostility toward his family. But he wants a family like going on in that house across the way. All of that from just this house sitting there with a light flickering. He still derives all this meaning from it. It's sort of these things sort of bubble off and become real for him. So whether he's right about what's going on in the house or not is sort of irrelevant. And see, you ready for this? We are Alfie. You are Alfie. When you're reading these stories, when you're watching these movies, when you're partaking of any art, any humanities, Marvel movies, TV shows, comic books, whatever it is, you are approaching and interacting with that art, and you are accessing parts of your psyche, your history, your feelings, your thoughts, your ideas, your assumptions, your values. You are accessing all of those things, and as you're going to see, if you pay attention to what bubbles up, it can be very informative and actually practical. Yes, I have a challenge here. I want to meet it. I want to try my best to meet it. And that is, some of you are going, oh, this humanity stuff, it's a bunch of BS, touchy-feely, soft stuff, doesn't have anything to do with the hard facts of life. I like the hard facts of life. Well, I want to teach you a very practical method that you can use in your everyday life that involves using your own reactions to and interpretation of art to understand things about yourself better, so that you can be the kind of person you want to be in the world. You can use any sort of artistic thing that you encounter. You can put on a certain way of thinking. You can turn it off too, don't worry. But you can put on a certain way of thinking and analyzing that teaches you things that are of real value about yourself, so that you can be the kind of person you want to be. So now, as you read the next story called Good Country People, let's start practicing this right away by being very deliberate in some thoughts when you go into it. As you go into it, ask yourself, first of all, about the title. Good Country People. So obviously, Flannery O'Connor, the writer, is implying that there are good people in the story, or at least she's going to talk about good people, which immediately brings up questions of who's good? How do you know? What qualifies as good? All right, let me know if you got questions or comments. Remember, don't suffer in silence. Reach out to me. And of course, just reach out to me to chat about any of this. I love talking about this stuff. I love talking to my students. So just chat me up if you want to. Also, if you have questions or concerns, let me know.